Hello! Today I'm going to be reviewing this fabulous Red Geraniums 12th scale flower kit from Ladies Mile Miniatures and showing you how easy it is to put together. Your kit will arrive in one of these little grip seal bags. Nice photograph on the front there of how the completed kit will look. And the kit includes the paper covered wire stems, nice fine gauge florist wire there. Large flowers, tiny flowers, and then you get the large and the small leaves. Now when the kit arrived, the leaves were all in together and so were the flowers, so I've just separated those out into their own bags just to make it easier as I'm working on the kit. And you also get a nice instruction leaflet, step-by-step instructions there, and on the back a list of the tools that you'll find useful. But we'll have a look at the tools next. Now this kit comes in red and pink, and I've chosen the red because it's going to be for my doll's house kitchen and I want to pick out the red that's in the curtains in there. And each kit includes enough pieces to make 12 geraniums. Now Theresa has very kindly sent me extra of everything so that I could have a practice before actually recording the video. Okay, so now let's have a look at the tools that you're going to need. To assemble the kit you'll need a PVA or tacky glue with a fine tip applicator, a pair of fine tip tweezers for handling the small parts, an embossing tool, and that's for shaping the petals and leaves, a dressmaking pin, and that's for punching holes into the larger flowers, and then a piece of really stiff foam, and that's for placing the leaves on when we use the embossing tool to shape them, and another piece of foam which is handy for standing the flowers in whilst the glue is drying. You'll need paints or a felt tip pen to colour the leaves, and I've got a sort of reddish brown colour here, but you can also use dark green or black. You'll need some clay or plasticine to go into your pot so that we can arrange the stems in there, tea leaves to create the earth, and you will actually need your own flower pots. Now I'm going to be making mine from quilling paper later on. So let's get started. So I want to make 2 pots with 3 geraniums in each, so I've got the pieces out here to make a start. And the first thing to do is dip each of the stems into the glue to form a bead at the top, and that's to stop the larger flower from coming off. So I've dispensed some glue onto a piece of card there, and I'm just dipping the end in like that, and then we're going to stick that into the foam over here and leave that to dry. And even if you're going to make all 12, it's probably best to do maybe 3 or 6 at a time. And these stems are quite long, but obviously they can be easily trimmed to fit exactly into your pot, so leave them at their full length for now. And then when we display them in the pot we can see if we need to cut any off. And that one as well. So whilst they're drying, I'm now going to turn to the large flower, and we're going to begin by making a hole right in the centre, and that's where we're going to thread it onto the stem. So just poke that through like that and jiggle it a little bit. I'm actually going to do all 6 at the same time. And if you haven't got any of this stiffer foam, you can actually use an eraser and do it on there. Final one there. Now bring in your embossing tool, and we're going to begin by shaping each of the petals. So you just want to go round in small circular motions like that, and as you're doing it you'll see the edges of the petal start to turn upwards. And this is just creating a more natural shape. When you've done each of the individual petals like that, you can also then work the embossing tool in the centre, just to sort of form a cup shape. See how they close up like that. For this next step you're going to need your pointed tweezers, and we're actually going to thread the flower head up onto the stem. Now I just had a go at this and couldn't get it on, so I needed to make the little hole in the centre there a little bit bigger, so I just used the pin again and just sort of put it in and twisted it around a little bit. You'll find that the pin is thinner than the wire. So push that up onto there, and then just feed it all the way up like that. And that little bead of glue we put on will stop that from coming off the end. But push it up as far as you can, and then just put another little dot of glue underneath just to secure that in place. So I'm just going to grab a cocktail stick to do that with. Just take a little bit of glue there and just dot it underneath like that, and then that can go back into the foam. Now the more you handle the stems, the weaker they become, so you may need to then just use your tweezers just to press that back into your foam like that, and then take the next one and do the same thing again. And again I'm just going to make that hole in the centre there a little bit bigger. Again, feed that on like that. So just push that up as high as it will go, and don't worry if you think you're misshaping them, because we can just pop them back into a nice shape before we attach the next lot of tiny flowers. With a little bit of glue under there. And again, pop that back into your foam to dry. We're now going to shape the tiny flowers, and for each large flower head you're doing, you'll need 9 of these smaller ones, and 4 of them fit around the little bit of stem that's poking up in the middle, and then we attach 1 to each leaf. So I've just tipped out here enough to do those 4 around the centre of each flower. And again we're going to shape these using the embossing tool, and you're just going to go around the centre like that, just to make them curl up into a little cup shape. And usually on these embossing tools you get a larger and a smaller ball at each end, so I'm using the smaller one for this. So I've spread my individual flowers out here on the piece of foam, so I've got more room to work on them. And we're now going to attach those 4 tiny flowers around the centre of the larger one. So you want to begin by applying a little bit of glue around the top, so actually onto the flower head. I'm putting a little bit more onto that stem as well. And then take your first tiny flower, and you just want to attach it in the centre there up against that bit of stem, and you'll need your tweezers to do this. Take your second one. I'm going to put that beside it. The next one. And a final one there. I think I need to put a little bit more glue on for that one. What I'm also going to do is just try to move them in so that I'm covering up that stem in the centre. And I'm just going to dot on a tiny little bit more glue around that side. Stick the 4th one around there. Like that. So we'll now leave that to dry and move on to the next one. So whilst the flower heads are drying on that lovely sunny spot there on my desk, I'm going to make a start on colouring and shaping the leaves. So you get a small and a large leaf in the kit. Now I'm actually making quite small flower pots because I want one to fit on my kitchen window ledge and one on that little shelf on the kitchen dresser. I'm actually only going to use the smaller leaves. But of course, if you're using a larger pot or if you're doing a pot for a garden display, then these big leaves give you that lovely sort of bushy look which you would find on a real geranium. So before we shape the leaves, we're going to add a little bit of colour to make them look more realistic. And for that I'm just using a felt tip pen, and I've got this sort of reddish brown colour here. But you can use paints. If you're using felt tip, you can also use a dark green or even a black. And you've got a couple of options here for adding colour to the leaves. And the first one is you can do sort of like a little line around the edge. I'm just going to get hold of the tweezers there and hold that in place. So just do a little sort of zigzaggy line just before the edge of the leaf there, like that, to create that sort of circle. Or you can colour in the whole centre of the leaf. So same sort of using the zigzaggy movement like that, and just colour in the whole centre. So choose which one you prefer, or you could probably do a mixture of each. Once you've added colour to each of your leaves, turn them over, and again use your ball tool, and you want to go around the outside edge of the leaf so that it starts to curl upwards at the edges like that. And then turn it back over and do the same in the centre so that it starts to curl back the other way. And that really does give it a more realistic look. And I don't know how many of these I'm going to need, but I've done all of them. And then I'll just make each plant look as bushy as I can. They can now be put to one side, and we'll continue with the flower heads. We're now going to attach the remaining tiny flowers. So I've prepared my pieces again here using the embosser tool. And we need 5 of those for each flower head. And these smaller flowers are then placed on each petal of the larger flower. So I'm going to use my glue with the fine applicator, and I just want to put a little dot onto each petal. Again, using your tweezers, just bring in one of the tiny flowers and attach it to the petal. And you may need to keep cleaning your tweezers so there's no glue residue on them, otherwise you'll find the tiny flowers will just stick to the tweezers and not where you want them to. Just pick that up and do those other 2 around there. final one there. So that's our basic geranium, and that looks a little bit misshapen now, but once that's dried we can push it into more of a sort of ball shape. So again, just leave that to dry off and do the same with the remaining flower heads. Once your flower heads have completely dried, you can shape them into more of a ball shape. Now I left these dry in probably for almost an hour while I went and had a bit of lunch, but do let them dry off completely before you attempt this, as you might find they just sort of fall apart. Just really gently squeeze them in at the bottom like that, so you're sort of pushing in all those hanging petals and creating more of a ball rather than a sort of splayed out shape. And they shape quite easily as well. Like that. And we can now attach the leaves. So take one of the flowers. I'm just going to begin by applying a little bit of glue along the stem. Now if you look at geraniums, you'll see that the leaves aren't right up against the flower heads. There's a little bit of stem showing and then the leaves begin. So put your glue just down the stem a little bit. I suppose I've gone down by about 6 millimeters, quarter of an inch there. And then take one of your leaves, and the little sort of stem that you see on the leaf there, that's the bit that you want to attach to the stem of the flower. Now again, I'm doing this at a bit of a funny angle. If I just sort of lay the stem against the wire, and I'm tilting the leaf backwards as I do it, and it does say in the instructions that you can trim off the stem a little bit to make it easier to attach. So I'm going to put one there like that, and again, when they're sort of dried off a bit, we can shape them around. And then I'll take the second leaf there, and I'm going to put that at the same sort of height. Put it back a bit like that. Because they're just paper, the glue does take pretty quickly, so you'll find you can sort of move them around a little bit as you're doing it. So that's the first two on there. And then I'll come back and do the other three lower down the stem once they've actually dried off a bit. So do that to each of your flowers, and you can place them differently if you like. You might want to put 3 up there and then the larger ones further down. I'm doing it this way as I'm just using the smaller leaves, and I've just actually made my pots, and they are quite small. They're probably, I don't know, 10 millimeters across in diameter at the top, so that's why I didn't want to use those larger leaves, as I won't be able to get the flowers nice and close together in the pot. Like I said, if you're doing a display for a garden or a larger pot, then do use those bigger leaves. They do look very realistic. Right, again, I'm trying to look through the camera and do this, but let me just move around a little bit so I can actually see what I'm doing. And you can sort of give the little paper stem a press against the wire like that. I really love how these look once you start sort of adding the leaves. It all just starts becoming really realistic. I've just bent the stem back on that one. Looks nice, really like the placement of those. So it is a little bit fiddly, but just take your time. If you don't have one of these precision glue bottles. You can just use a cocktail stick, as I'm sure you've seen me do in a lot of my tutorials. Just put a little bit onto a piece of card. I'm now going to continue down the stem and add another 3 leaves to each flower. And we're going to put that one quite close to the ones above. Got hold of that at the wrong angle. And I'm just going to continue around the stem, and I'm just staggering them a little bit. You can work on the flower whilst it's in the foam. I just find it's easier to twist it around in my hand. On there like that. Remember to keep cleaning off the tip of your tweezers. Otherwise you'll find that the leaves are sticking to the tweezers rather than the wire. So whilst the leaves are drying, I want to start making up the pots, and I've made a couple of flower pots here using quilling paper, and then I've just painted those using terracotta coloured watercolour paint. And you want to fill the pot with modelling clay. So just take a little bit, warm it up in your fingers, and then press that into the pot. I've got too much there, but I just want to make sure it's pressed completely into the pot, and then I can take that top bit off like that, and the same with the other one. And then to create the sort of earth effect on top of there, I'm going to use tea leaves. So tip a few out onto a piece of card, and then just apply a little bit of the glue to the top of the clay. You can use a cocktail stick to spread that out. Getting it right around the edges. And then you can actually just press those down into the tea leaves. Twist it around, making sure you're covering all of the glue. I then find it easier if you actually make the holes in the clay first. So I'm just going to do 3 holes in there in a sort of triangle. And that way you can just push the wire into the holes rather than having to make the hole with the wire, which will tend to bend it like that. And then, as I said earlier, these wires are quite long for such a small pot, so I want to cut them off, just sort of measuring out how long I want them to be. And I want the leaves to be fairly near to the earth there. I think I'll cut the first one off about there. And these wires you can just easily snip with scissors, like that. I'm just going to grab my tweezers again and push that into that first hole. Push it down nice and firmly. And I'll play around with the leaves in a moment. I want to cut sort of similar amount off that one. That one in as well. Then you can press the clay around them. And just make that final hole more sort of in the centre of those two. Okay, you want to trim off about that amount again. Push that one in as well. And then what you can do is just go round and sort of jiggle the leaves around a bit. Make it into a nice full shape. Like that. So pleased with how that's come out. Do my second pot. And there are the completed plants. And I'm really pleased with how these have turned out. They've actually turned out better than I thought. And this was a lovely kit to put together. The pieces are really well cut, the instructions are easy to follow, and it's a true to scale, really pretty kit. In the past I've been a bit reluctant to have a go at flower kits, just because I thought they always seemed so fiddly and so tricky. But I was surprised at this one. Yes, they are fiddly because obviously you're dealing with a lot of small parts, but as you can see, this was really easy to put together. If you have trouble seeing the little parts, one of those desk magnifiers would be a real help. Now do pop over and have a look at Theresa's website, where you'll find lots of lovely flower and plant kits, and also some pre-made plant kits. Now Theresa did tell me that she's actually in the middle of having her website updated, so if there's something in particular you're looking for which you can't find on the website, then do drop Theresa a line. She's a lovely lady and I'm sure she'll be able to help. She also has an Etsy shop, and I'll pop the address to the shop in the description box below, along with her website address. And if you do go over and take a look or decide to buy any of the kits, do give me a mention. I really hope you've enjoyed this review. I've really enjoyed making these kits up and I'm just delighted with the results. I can't wait to put these in my doll's house kitchen. So if you've ever felt a little bit reluctant to have a go at a kit, I hope this will persuade you to have a go. Now if you'd like to make your own flower pots, if you're also looking to do something quite small, you can find tutorials for these in my book, Build a Garden Shed in 1/12 scale, but they are super easy to make using quilling paper. So I'm now going to go and put these in place in my doll's house kitchen. So for now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon.